This is Tom Wyczawski. I'm team teaching with Jeff Campbell, leading innovation. My next few lectures are going to be about executing innovation initiatives. I am the former Chief Operating Officer of Dunkin' Donuts and presently a 12-store franchisee for Dunkin' Donuts. Over the last 30 years, I've led many innovation projects, some with great success, some, frankly, not so much. I have a lot of experience, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm going to try to share with you both the successes and the pitfalls of leading innovation initiatives to a successful conclusion. We're going to talk about four topics today. First of all, why execution matters so much. What's the rationale? What's the big deal? Secondly, what will be your graded assignment for this lecture series? It's a series of 4 lectures. It's going to culminate in an assignment, which is a case study that I'm intimately familiar with. And we'll introduce the format for that final assignment that will be graded as a part of this 4-part lecture series. Next, we'll go through the case we'll be studying, and we'll introduce that case to you, so over the next 4 lectures you can begin to understand the case and learn from the case. And finally, we'll have lecture 1 of 4, giving you an overview of how to execute. So, why does execution matter so much? I'll give you 2 really fundamental high-level reasons. First of all, 80% of companies' strategies fail. The failure of those strategies leads to a lot of disruption in companies, including the turnover of the CEO. Over the last few years, 20% of the top 200 CEOs were turned over. And you say, well, why is that? Did they have horrible strategies? We would argue, is it that companies don't understand their customers, their markets, how to create an offer that their customers want and is differentiated from their competitors? Most of the evidence is no. Most companies are filled with smart, capable people who do know what their customers want. It is that they can't take the innovation idea and make it happen in the marketplace for the company. They simply can't execute. And that lack of execution leads to failure of strategy and the turnover of executive leadership. For example, I bet you know what innovation to your company's combination of products and services would be required to make your company more competitive. I bet you actually know more than one innovation idea that would make a measurable difference to your company's productivity by reducing costs or growing sales. Take 5 minutes now and just write down all of your ideas from your perspective and your experience within the company. Take 5 minutes and do that. You'll be surprised at how many you come up with. So for a moment, imagine your company with your very best idea fully implemented. What barriers exist in your mind to making your best innovation idea a reality? Is it that you're risk averse? Is it the lack of time and resources? Do you not have the credibility to make something happen? Is it your ability to sell the idea into management? Is it management access so that you can actually present your idea? Or other barriers? Think about those barriers that exist in your mind to making your best innovation idea a reality. In actuality, none of these should be your biggest concern. Your biggest concern should be your ability to lead that innovation idea through the organization to full execution. Yet, in most companies, it is the innovation executors, the change makers, the folks who get things done that make a difference, that get the biggest opportunities and promotions. So, we're going to go on a very short journey to this lecture and 3 others to better understand the issue of execution. For it's the gap between strategy and results is execution. Let's explore that gap. Before we get into the material, though, I do want to set up your final assignment format. This is a classic case study format. It's got 7 parts. I've modified it a bit for this case that we're going to be doing. Part 1 is the immediate issue or problem. So what's the problem? What decisions have to be made? What does decision or full implementation have to be done? When does it have to be done? Any associated issues that have to be considered. That's the immediate issue or problem. Part 2, issue analysis or information summary, summarizing the important facts, opinions, and assumptions, stating that clearly, identifying any long-term issues, and making key assumptions if the information isn't provided for you in the case. Step 3, alternative solutions or options, coming up with at least 3 solid alternatives and then evaluating the pros and cons of each. 4th, making a recommendation. 5th, 6th, and 7th are 3 components of execution that we're going to be going in depth on the next 3 lectures. First of it is strategic thinking, or defining the future state. The 6th component of execution, creating a clear focus. What are the plans? What are the boundaries? What are my leverage points that I'm going to make sure that I move the needle against? And finally, speed to market. Time is your enemy in execution. Every day that goes by, resistance grows, confidence dwindles. You must get to market. You must begin to make an impact quickly. So time is your enemy, and we'll talk about that in our final lecture. So there's the format. You can read it at your leisure. It'll be required for your final assignment. A little more about your final assignment. Due to time constraints, I'm going to answer questions 1 and 2 that we just went over. The answers follow in the next few slides. Your assignment is to answer questions 3 and 4 by next Sunday, 8/13/17. Brainstorm with your fellow students, friends, colleagues, with your family members. Go on the internet, go to the library. Oh my gosh, the library, what's that? To develop 3 possible solutions. Complete your pros and cons for each. Use some of the tools and the processes that you've been taught earlier in this class. Then pick a solution. Then answer questions 3 and 4 of the case study. To be clear, this needs to be emailed to me by 8/13/17. I've provided my email and phone number on the first page of this presentation. I will provide you feedback by the following Tuesday so you can complete the next 2 sections by 8:20 and the final section by 8:27. Again, I will provide feedback along the way to help you improve your final case study response. You should do fine as long as you put some effort against it. The next 2 slides I'm not going to read for you. You can read at your own in your own time, but they are the answers to questions 1 and 2. In brief, I worked with Dunkin' Donuts in one way or another for the last 20 years. One of the real challenges, it's a billion-dollar business with almost all of its stores west of the Mississippi. And the challenge for many years has been to grow the brand west of the Mississippi. And one of the big barriers to that is how to supply these stores with donuts. You'll read through this case the challenges that many of the issues. I've answered question 1 on your final case study. You can copy that right in to your final case study. I've also answered question 2. So, as a part of your assignment, you need to thoroughly read and study both questions, the answers to questions 1 and 2 that I've provided for you. Okay, so let's introduce this topic of innovation execution. In July of 1990, Saddam Hussein in Iraq was the fourth most powerful army in the world. Amazing when you think about that. On August 2nd of that year, residents of Kuwait City in Kuwait looked out their windows in horror to see Iraqi tanks in their streets. By September 10th, 1990, there was an approved operational plan to remove Iraq from Kuwait. Literally only a month later. How'd they do this amazing planning feat to mobilize and remove Iraq from Kuwait? By January 16, 1991, that plan was fully mobilized and being executed, and by the end of February, the war was basically over. A stunning accomplishment of strategic thinking, clear focus, and speed of execution. These principles are outlined in the book by Warden and Russell called Winning in Fast Time. I recommend it to you. It's certainly not required as a part of this class, but I do recommend it to you. We'll take the principles from this book combined with what I've learned in 30 years of innovation leadership to help you better understand the power of innovation execution. I'd ask you now to go to YouTube and search for General Schwarzkopf's famed news conference. General Schwarzkopf's famed news conference. And he'll provide an overview of the planning and execution to actually remove Saddam Hussein's army from Kuwait during that time. It's a fascinating case study of innovation execution. So, a brief overview of what we're going to be learning in the next 3 lectures. There are 3 key components to leading innovation. First, thinking strategically throughout execution. Tactics don't win the day. You have to have a strategy against your key leverage points that are going to make sure that you move the needle, whether that's against your competition in business or obviously in the case of General Schwarzkopf against your enemy in war. Secondly, you have to focus sharply. You have to know what those centers of gravity, what those leverage points are. You have to create and evaluate options to move those leverage points, to change the game. Then you have to narrow your options and test quickly. And then you have to build a sound business case because you have to be able to sell your idea in to senior management to move beyond the testing phase. And finally, you got to move quickly. Time is your enemy. Every day that goes by will create a natural barrier to your ultimate success. So you have to measure your ultimate success constantly. You have to have open planning. We'll talk about that. Planning that's interactive and ongoing. Plans are not made just once. They're made constantly and revised, and you have to have constant communication. Then you have to resource to win, and you have to adapt. So, thinking strategically throughout execution. Organize your team. Make sure you have all the stakeholders involved. Actually, what Warden and Russell argue is the team needs to be big. It needs to have a lot of viewpoints, and you need to have thoughtful, strategic ways to get all those viewpoints incorporated into your ideas. You need to understand the system. In the case of the Iraq War, the system was a series of resources that war-type resources that are positioned and that move and that attack or defend positions together in orchestration. What are the leverage points against those resources and those positions? When do you attack? When do you defend? How do you attack? How do you defend? and how do you make sure that you supply. In the case of the Dunkin' Donuts study, the system is the supply system for donuts. There's many alternatives, some which are being used today. But what are the leverage points? What are the key issues? And how do you break through those leverage points, those centers of gravity, and change the game? And once you understand the system, you got to paint a clear picture of the future system. How is it going to change? You have to paint that verbally. You have to paint that graphically. You have to paint it in mind that you're going to have to sell this into management. And finally, you have to establish boundaries. What's in the scope of what you're doing and what's out of the scope. Not so you can reduce your work, but so that you can focus your resources and your time and make sure you don't take on issues that are really outside the bounds of what needs to be taken on in order to make sure you win in your execution. Then you have to focus sharply. Now you have a clear future state. You've established your boundaries. You know what it's going to take to win. But now you got to focus on those centers of gravity, those leverage points, and you got to move the needle. You got to begin to create and evaluate options to move the needle. You got to narrow those options, and you got to test quickly. The quicker you can get into test, the quicker you'll get a business case pulled together for your management. Or in the case of General Schwarzkopf, for the Secretary of Defense at that time, who was Colin Powell. Then you can move quickly. And you need to move quickly. Ultimately, as I said before, you need to measure your success all the time. Every day, certainly every week, definitely every month. You need to have a scorecard that clearly states whether you're winning or losing, whether you're making progress towards your ultimate goal or whether you're not. You need to continue constant communication and an open planning mindset. Open planning means it's flexible, it adapts constantly. Then you need to resource to win. So you need to make sure that you sell in your idea and you sell in the resources needed to move the needle, to have sufficient resources so that you can execute all components of your plan. And finally, you need to adapt. Plan, resource, repeat. You'll hear me say it over and over and over again. Update your plan. Update your resources. Argue for more resources. Maybe you need less resources. Maybe you need different resources. But update your plan. Resource your plan. And then repeat. One of the biggest mistakes I see over and over and over again in leading innovation is the leaders make one plan. They resource it once. And if you don't win, you complain about not winning. You can't do that way. You got to make your plan. You got to constantly update your plan with the help of your team. And you got to constantly update the resourcing with the help of senior management. So, for the next 3 lectures, Lecture 1 will focus on thinking strategically. Lecture 2 will focus on focusing sharply. And Lecture 3 will focus on moving quickly. I appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward to working with each of you over the next couple weeks to complete this case study. Thank you for your time and attention, and have a great weekend.